Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Motor City Mad Miles Show. And I am pleased to be joined by my longtime colleague, Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe. Bob, glad to have you on the show.
Very nice to be with you, Scott.
Really is. Always see you in North Carolina. I met Bob many, many years ago when at the NBA draft at the Palace of Auburn Hills. Now the building is demolished. I tell you, I miss that place. How did you like the Palace of Auburn Hills, by the
Well,
way?
it was revolutionary at the time because it was the NBA answer to Camden Yards in Baltimore. It was a
Yeah,
new idea about how to arrange luxury boxes for one thing at a
right.
mid level rather than at the top. And it was certainly a architectural phenomenon at the time. And I remember being given a guided tour before it opened and so on and so forth. And it was it's just hard to believe that it was declared to be obsolete. I mean, come on. But it did change indoor architecture as to the degree and sports to the degree that Camden Yards changed baseball park architecture.
Yeah, it sure did. I miss that place. I used to spend a lot of time. Everybody, just to give you information about Bob, he's a national sports writer, sportscaster and sports writer of the year 4 times. He won that award. He's inducted into the College Basketball Writers Hall of Fame and the New England Basketball Hall of Fame. So I had to put a couple Hall of Fames, Bob, and if that isn't good enough for everybody out there, he won the Kurt Gowdy Award and he's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. I believe that's a Naismith one, right, Bob? Uh,
Yes.
and then, of course, Bob Simmons called Bob the best basketball writer ever. Yeah, I guess I can be kind of partial toward that too, because of all the basketball things that Bob has done. So there were other ones, but those are the ones that kind of stood out with me, Bob. So, all right, well, we have a lot to get to tonight. So you retired in 2012. How's retirement treating you?
Very well. I did for a reason, and there are times I'll see a game, go to a game, and say, "Well, I wouldn't mind writing that one." But in general terms, I made the right decision for myself in terms of lifestyle and the way that the business was changing and so forth, and I had accomplished all the important things that I ever wanted to do. I didn't have too much left over that I didn't get to do, and so that was part of the deal too.
Do you go out there and spend a lot of time doing international travel?
Well, we've traveled we're big Francophiles, and I've been to
Okay.
Paris 19 times. Okay, over the
You've been
years,
to where 19 times?
19 times in Paris. My wife's been there 21. She
Wow.
had the gall. Imagine this guy. She had the gall to go there twice without me. I mean, can imagine that. Yeah, that's
Wow.
testing the bonds of matrimony to the degree. But no, I love Europe particularly. I have never been to South America. I've been to Japan and of course a business twice, and of course I did the Beijing Olympics.
Right.
So that's my Asia credentials. But mostly it's Europe, and we've really enjoyed going to Europe.
I mean, you got out at the right time for crying out loud. But you didn't have to deal with all the nonsense everybody else had to deal with COVID-19. Everything upside down.
Right.
It, it,
Not
it
not not professionally, not at all.
oh, I'll tell you, it really did. It killed access for a lot of us guys, and
Sure.
it just turned everything upside down. It gave PR people the more control over us than ever. And if there's ever a time to get out of it, you definitely
No,
nailed
I don't miss all that stuff. No, no.
it. So, anyways, you told me your goal was to cover a sporting event in all 50 states. How is that coming along?
Oh, I did it. I
Well,
accomplished
you
it in
did.
2024. The 50th state was South Dakota. I got to see the Jackrabbits take the floor,
Okay.
and that was number 50. It's funny. It was not a goal from the start. It's something that evolved. And when I hit to around 47 or 8, I said, "Oh, wow. I've been to sporting events in that many states. Be nice to do all 50." And finally, the 50th one hanging out there was South Dakota. And the options you have are fairly limited. You've got South Dakota and South Dakota State football, basketball, and you've got
Right.
the Sioux City Canaries minor league
Okay.
independent baseball. That's pretty much it, except for I wouldn't have minded at all going to the Corn Palace to see high school basketball, which I know that tournament plays there, and I think the local JUCO plays there. But that would have been fine. But anyway, I accomplished my goal with South Dakota State in 2024, and got to write about it. So I was very pleased with that.
So I have to ask you, what did you cover in Alaska?
Alaska, I happened to, in my 70th birthday,
Okay.
in 2016, I decided that though I had not paid any particular attention to my 40th, 50th, or 60th, I thought the 70th was a milestone. And I wanted to be somewhere, wake up somewhere I'd never been. And it just so happened, my birthday is February 21, middle of basketball season. And
Okay.
we went to Fairbanks.
Oh,
I wanted to get to the heart of Alaska, not just
okay.
Anchorage, which I suspect is just another big city. And
Yeah.
Fairbanks was Alaska, and Alaska Fairbanks was going to be home. And I went to a Alaska Fairbanks basketball game. So that was my Alaska.
Yeah, I actually have an old Chamber of Commerce head that actually moved there recently. So, you did burst my bubble one time when I told you that I went to the Field of Dreams thing. And I said, I did a sporting event. I did the Field of Dreams. No, I don't count that as one. Why? I mean, the Field of Dreams, man, I did videos there. I was living proof. I crashed through the car. Isn't that considered something sports? I mean, I know maybe it didn't have a whistle and it didn't have an umpire. Well, but it's still, I don't know. If you did, I didn't care. It was just really funny how you said
No,
it
that's a
don't count.
milestone, but I'm not sure. I would probably be a hard marker and say that would be peripheral. That wouldn't count as one of my 50.
Okay, that's all right. Just like to bring
And
it up.
unless there's a real game going on there, that's fine.
Yeah, no, there was a real team of me just going out there and plowing through the corn, taking a video and having the time of my life. Now
I'm sure that's something else.
Oh yeah, well, don't worry. So I have to ask you, do you count paying for a stadium tour as legitimate? Because they do charge for that. And you get to go in the press box, the locker rooms. As far as stadium count is concerned, do you count that?
No, you got to see a ball. You got to see an athletic event.
Okay.
You don't just visit no. For this purpose, you have to see an event, something being competed, and I was able to do that in all 50 states.
Well, though, I will say one thing. Candy's on here with us, joining us, and when we went to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, she did do the big media day at the Superdome, so we have to count that at least, right? That she was in the Superdome for media day.
Right, but that's not an event. That's
it's not a sporting event. It's
no.
Okay.
And I also included in the story that I wrote for the Boston Globe, Puerto Rico, but I forgot, I forgot one, which was the Virgin Islands. In 2003, Boston Globe sent me down to cover Boston College in the Paradise Jam, and which they wound up winning over App State and Wichita State. And so I've actually got the 50 states plus Puerto Rico plus U.S. Virgin Islands.
Awesome. That's all I can say. So I know that you covered 20 NBA finals, 20 Final Fours, a World Series, 5 Super Bowls, and the last 7 Olympics. Anything stood out about?
Well, first of all, that's an incomplete tally that Wikipedia didn't update.
Okay. Well, then give me an update, please.
Well, I don't even know the exact number. I've been over 30. I think I'm up to 33 or 34 Final Fours.
Okay.
And however many NBA finals I have to annotate. So, but the big thing is the Final Fours. That was always my favorite event, and I've been I'm up in the 30s on that. But anyway,
that's all right. Well, I'm glad.
I can't. When I get asked this question about favorite events, I say, well, I got to go by sport. I can't just pick one that stand out over any others. And then you have the whole category of the Olympics, which is a whole different topic, and something that I never envisioned when I started out, that I would wind up going to all the Olympics I went to. 6 summer, 11, 6 summer, and 5 winter Olympics, starting with the Dream Team in 2020 and 1992. And once I got there, that was my first Olympics, and I wanted to get around as much as possible. And I fell in love with the Olympics and wound up doing 6 summer and 5 winter Olympics.
Wow, that's incredible. The only Olympic Games that I went to was in 1984. I bought a ticket as a fan. I was staying with my cousin Terry out there, and I remember buying a ticket to Dodger Stadium, watching the United States against Korea.
Oh, that's cool.
Over at Dodger Stadium. And then I bought tickets for basketball, and I went to the Forum and saw the Chinese play. So that And again, it was a lower tier game, but nevertheless, it was my first time in the Forum. I would eventually go back to the Forum later to see the Lakers play, but that was kind of neat. So I'd like to go back to the Olympics again. I believe they're back in LA in
Coming
20.
to LA in 2028.
Right. That's
Assuming
what I
that the
thought.
international community doesn't pull them from the US for this, political nonsense that's going on right now. So we don't want to get started on that. But the Olympics are going to be in LA in 2028 unless there's a major revolt against them.
Well, I'm glad I made it there anyways back in 1984. I'll never forget when Mary Lou Retton was doing some unbelievable things. I was in Westwood Village with my cousin. It was just surreal being there.
Yeah.
So I know you vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame, right? So I'm going to put you on the spot with three of these. Does Don Mattingly ever going to get in there?
He might get from a committee, and I always say I wouldn't have any objections. He's a very borderline Hall of Famer, and I have sympathy for him because his back is the reason he's not in the Hall of Fame. He was well on his way, but the numbers are aborted because of his back issue that messed up his career. He was a Hall of Famer on the way, no question, for a good. At one point, you could argue he was the best player in the game, but then he didn't get the full credentials of the numbers. But if you want to put him in, I'm not going to object.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I believe he should get in. They got all this paraphernalia there. The only thing missing with him is a plaque. It really is. But Don should get in. All right. So now that Pete Rose has passed away, when does he finally get in?
I was always staunchly against Pete Rose for the very simple reason that he violated the sacred rule about gambling. Okay. Every clubhouse in baseball, major and minor, has in 2 languages prohibitions about betting and gambling. Okay. And he violated that and then lied about it for decades until he put a book out and then finally came clean to a degree that he bet on the Reds while he was manager. And people say, well, oh, gee, bet on his own team. What's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is if you don't bet every night, the nights you don't bet, you're telling them you're not that confident about who you're pitching, period. So, you can't have it both ways. You cannot bet on your own team and then say that's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that if you're not going to bet every single game, which he did not. But he bet and he lied. However, now that baseball, as well as all the other sports, are totally in bed with gambling, they have forfeited the moral high ground that they once occupied. And it's no longer justifiable to ban somebody because they gambled on baseball when you are allowing it and you are making money from it, which is the reason you're doing it. And I said, so I did write this, Scott, that I would now, regrettably, but pick him up at the airport and drive him to Cooperstown myself because the baseball has totally forfeited the high moral ground. But with all the years he was out, there was a damn good reason, and he should not have been in.
I agree. Number one, you don't sit here and show up the Hall of Fame ceremony by having a book signing down the road.
Oh, every week, every year, he's so. And I'll say this about Pete Rose, and that would be true forever and ever. He may very well have loved baseball as much as anyone on this earth while he was alive, but he loved gambling more, and he proved it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, do any of the steroid guys get in? And should they have a special wing to get in? We're talking about.
I have voted. I have not voted for any of them at all. Although there are borderline people that people say you're being a hypocrite because I have voted for some people that people think should not have been voted for. Right. But the obvious people that we're talking about, I have never voted for. And the same thing. So I nothing's changed in that regard for me. But I have a solution. And I have actually proposed it to the hall, and a very simple solution. Outside the hall, it's where the room where all the plaques are, where the shinies are. You have a sign, and the sign says, "We have instructed our voters to vote strictly on the candidates' achievements, numbers. Period." Okay. There are people involved inside here who performed in an era when performance-enhancing drugs were rampant. You are free to feel the way you do about their inclusion here. So in other words, you want to give the finger to a plaque, go right ahead, okay? But we have told our voters it's strictly on the numbers. What's wrong? Do that, and then they all get in. and people understand they did what they did. I just don't see. I think that's the ideal solution.
So let me ask you, do you think Hank Aaron is the legitimate home run king, or
Oh, Green.
there-
Not, it's like jaywalk. No, of course he does. The answer is yes, I do. I think he's totally legit.
right?
He's my home run champ.
Yeah, I think
Aaron.
so too.
Okay, and
Yeah.
Greenies. Come on, compared to what they were doing, no. I'm sorry. If he took and we have no evidence that Hank Aaron, of all people,
Right.
took them. Now we know it. We know in that era that the Greenies were available. And Pete Rose was a Greenie guy. We know that, by the way. But we know that. But Aaron, I don't know for sure. I've never heard myself. Have you? Anybody
No.
testify that Hank Aaron, gulped Greenies? I don't know. But he's my home run champ.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Hank Aaron's a home run champ. I think Barry Bonds is a fraud, and I'll tell you why. Because all you need to do is that anybody believes him before and after is what about what he looked like in Pittsburgh, let alone what he looked like in San Francisco.
Hat size, the whole thing. And
Yeah,
of course,
exactly.
I know now there are counter argument to everything.
Uh-huh.
The Hall of Fame is in a sense telling the history of baseball, and you cannot tell the history of baseball without all these people in question.
Mm-hmm.
No, the Bonses, the McGuires, the Sosas, the Clemenses, the A-Rods, etc. Okay, all right, that's an argument, and some people who are very reputable, people that I, admire and colleagues, adopt that stance. I don't. I won't buy that. But there are people who make that argument. And I want to, and they're reputable people, but I'm not buying it.
Well, let me tell you a funny story, Bob. 1987, I was the director of public relations for the Gastonia Rangers, and Sammy Sosa, Juan Gonzalez were on that team, like 10 or 12 guys that made the big leagues, and we lost 94 games. I'll never forget the time. Get this, okay? I couldn't make this up even if I wanted to try. I'm asking the lady who's the Chicago Cubs person that I want to talk to Sammy. I was his PR person. The woman looked at me like I was an idiot. So you know what I did? Well, here I am standing on the field at Joe Robbie Stadium. Hey, Sammy, remember me? We worked together in Gastonia. He looks at me with a smile from here all the way to the Arctic Ocean. I swear, Bob, you could smile wider than that. Canada's even not wider than that. So Sammy, yeah, he gave me his body language. It tells everything. All right, lady, do you believe me? Now give me that interview, and I need a credential for tomorrow. Sammy gave me the interview the next day over his locker.
We know he wasn't a bad guy. They did what they did. They thought it was, it wasn't illegal at the time. We know all that stuff. Oh man, we can go on and on and on. It is a sorry chapter in baseball. And as a longtime voter, it took away all my fun of voting.
Really.
Because I want to vote on baseball issues only, right? I'll give you a classic example. Jack Morris. That was that's always the example I've given. Jack Morris, who made it on the final ballot, right? The final time, finally, okay? He was the winningest pitcher of the 80s.
Right.
Was it the 80s? Yeah. And
right.
He had great credentials. But if you let him in, he's got the highest ERA of any pitcher who has ever been in the Hall of Fame. And then you go back and you say, well, he was a guy that he pitched to win. He stayed in games. He had high, but he was a winner. And we know the famous game in the World Series in '91, that the 10-inning game, of course, et cetera. But that's either you buy his credentials or you don't. But it had nothing to do. There's no side issue with PEDs. That's a great baseball argument. You mentioned Mattingly, okay? Mattingly was on his way to the Hall of Fame until injuries derailed him. But some people say, he should have been in. Okay, fine. That's a baseball issue. But the steroids thing clouds the entire issue and takes all the fun away. And I hated it. I hated dealing with it. So, that really was a distraction.
So let me ask you a question about a couple other Detroiters that have been hotly debated. What about Lou Whitaker and Mickey Lolich?
Lou Whitaker and Trammell, I was present in the ballpark in Detroit. The Red Sox were the opponent when they came up.
Okay.
Trammell was triple Trammell. Remember that? He had hit
Yeah.
an inordinate amount of triples in AAA, and
Mhm.
he was a rookie, and Trammell got in, and I endorsed that definitely, and I have come around. I've been that Lou Whitaker should be in. Yes,
Okay.
Lou Whitaker is one of the guys that should be in. That's not in. That has been unfairly judged or not properly judged. So yes, I would endorse Lou Whitaker.
What about Mickey Lolich?
Mickey, borderline, Hall of very good. You know, I think of Mickey, you know, we know the World Series, you know, with the 3 wins in 68. And we know that the number, I got a number for you, 376. He went through 376 innings.
Wow.
376 innings that he went through in a game, in a season. And he was a really good pitcher. I think fall just short of the Hall of Fame. That's my vote. I wouldn't have voted.
That's okay. I'm asking that. Okay. Let's talk about basketball. I know you talk a lot about it. I'm glad we spent a little bit of time on baseball because I know you've written baseball books too. But once upon a time, the NBA used to be on tape delay. Then all of a sudden, Larry Bird Magic showed up and saved the league. So describe what that was like back in the day.
I was front and center naturally covering the Celtics, and here comes Bird and here comes Magic. And I also had been, the year before I covered the game in Utah. I covered the Indiana State, Michigan State game that Magic and the boys won, beating
Right.
Bird. And so I had a feel for those two. And I had seen the whole Final Four. So I saw Larry go 16 for 18 against DePaul in the semifinal game. 16 for
Right.
19, I think it was, yeah. And I saw the whole thing. All right. It was a blessing for baseball, and it was for basketball. And it was so fortunate for them that where they placed Bird in Boston, Magic in LA, having the Lakers and the Celtics having these dueling stars. They were the glamour franchises, you know, coming out of the 60s. And it couldn't have, NBA couldn't have plotted it. If they cheated, they couldn't have planned it better. But it was two. It was totally fun to go through that whole rivalry thing. And then to see them bond ultimately, you know, and they're very good friends even today. You know that it's really true. And now, if it's very fashionable to say they quote saved the NBA, they helped the NBA, and they set the table for Michael. But the
Right.
person who took the NBA in the direction that it now is with this globalization is
Mhm.
Michael. There's no doubt, it's Michael. But they set the table for Michael, and they deserve credit for that. But yeah, even the third year in, you know, the second year, and when Celtics won the 81 championship against Houston, it was delayed tape. That was the second year. I don't know when. I don't have the chronology, Scott, as when they finally got off of that and got live TV. I was at the 83 finals with the Celtics, with the Lakers and the Philly Warriors. I mean, excuse me, the 76ers. I don't know what was on TV. I paid no attention. I was at the 84. I was there. I paid no attention to TV. I was 85. So you tell me, I don't know when they started airing live, because I was always at the games in those days.
Right.
So I don't know. But they set the table for Michael. And Michael, with the help of David Stern. And David, those three, you know, they're all bonded, but Michael took what they set and took it to another level.
It's funny how you just mentioned David Stern's name, because that was my follow-up question. Called GMTA, Bob, like we always have. Great minds think alike. So let's talk about David Stern's legacy. Here's a guy that took Larry O'Brien. Obviously, you know, things were tough under his tenure, but when David Stern took over, oh Nelly, as Keith Jackson would say. Let's talk about the legacy.
David Stern was a visionary. You know, he was not just some schleppy, nerdy lawyer. He was a guy with a vision, and he loved the game and understood, and he had a vision, and he definitely helped accelerate the progress of this league. By 87, the Bucks, we had the McDonald's open, and Milwaukee, and then they went to Madrid the next year, and the Hawks had gone to Russia to play. And all with the approval, and plus he became friendly with Boris Stankovic, the head of FIBA, the International Basketball Association, and that led ultimately by '92 to the Dream Team, which was all Boris Stankovic's invention completely. That that we get the Americans involved. And he wanted the Americans involved at the professional level because he wanted to raise the bar for the rest of the world to show them where they have to be to catch up to the Americans. And the only way to do it is to find out how good they really are in person. And he propagated the idea of the dream team. David went along with it, made sure that we got our proper team, and you all know what happened. So, you know, the ultimate manifestation of it we are seeing today with 5 consecutive international MVPs. The most recent ones from Canada, but nonetheless, the previous ones were from Europe, with Doncic and Giannis and
Right.
Embiid, who was Embiid from Africa. But anyway, David Stern is a pivotal person in the history of the league. Should never be forgotten.
Yeah, no, I tell you, I always admired his strength and the way he stood up to people, and he didn't take any nonsense at all. David Stern to me was just one of those hard-nosed old school guys.
And yet,
that-
and the other thing about him, though, for us, he was a real person. He
Was
he, he used to hang around at the finals and kibitz. He had a sense of humor.
Mhm.
I got to know him and I really appreciated his company. And this was a smart, funny man. He wasn't some stuffed shirt. He wasn't some far from that. He was a very amenable and he was a great package, a great ambassador for the league.
Yeah, I was happy. The only thing I liked about the Dream Team is the fact that Magic and Bird were actually teammates on that, and let alone you put Michael. I still, being a guy from Metro Detroit, wish Isaiah was on it, but I know there's probably a lot more
Another
behind
story.
that as well.
That's another story. First of all, Bird and Magic were co-captains, which met everybody's approval, specifically Michael.
Right.
Michael definitely was on board with them being the co-captains. Bird was the end of his career, you know, and that was that's the last he ever played, you know, and because of his back. But they appreciated that. Isaiah, he was blackballed, and
Yeah.
I'm going to finger Michael, but he was blackballed. He deserves to be on the team. There's no question. His talent, but that was a blackball, and that's a, you know, sad. They all have to live with it. The guys are responsible, and starting with Michael, and they have to live with that. He should have been on the team. I agree with you.
So if you have to choose a coach, Chuck Daly or Phil
perfect coach.
Jackson. I mean, I'm gonna give you 2 questions. Okay, Chuck Daly was the right coach there. What a heck of a coach he really was, wasn't he?
Well, I have to full disclosure. I go back to when he was at Boston College when he arrived in 1969, succeeding Bob Cousy. Okay. And I didn't know anything about him except he had this reputation. He was assistant coach at Duke. Okay. And with Hubie Brown, by the way, they were assistant coaches for Vic Bubas at Duke at one point. They worked together. All right. And he comes to Boston. I get to know him. I mean, I really, you know, socialized. I got to know him, and he was a fascinating guy, a wonderful guy. And 2 years at BC, then he went to Penn, and took them to heights they hadn't seen before, and then eventually got into the NBA. But why he was the best coach for that team, they didn't need anybody who wanted to be the show. They needed a coach who would set the table, but guide them and step back when it was necessary, step up when it was necessary. His ego was not in state. There were other guys who would have been needed to be, you know, I'm the coach. No, Chuck was the ideal guy. They couldn't have found a better guy for that first dream team than Chuck Daly. Absolutely.
Well, just, you know, I believe his assistant on that team, wasn't it Lenny Wilkins, if I remember right?
Well, Coach K, Mike was his assistant.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know Lenny Wilkins was involved
I
in.
wish
in
I
the
could
USA
confirm
program.
that since I was there every step of the way. But the one I most remember is Mike Krzyzewski.
Right. Okay, I remember him too.
And but if Lenny was if you're right, I'm not saying you're wrong. He's the one that PJ Carlissimo was on this, because you know what his job was among others. He would arrange for Michael Jordan's tea times. He was in charge of Michael's tea times. And,
no kidding.
And you could tell when Michael was ready to play. It's on the days when he only played 18 as opposed to 36.
Wow. Yeah, I can't remember if Lenny was the assistant on it, but I'll tell you one thing. I am happy for Lenny for one thing. At least he got a statue in Seattle recently outside of that new arena. If anybody deserves a statue there, it's definitely Lenny Wilkins.
What a legacy from Boys High School, where he was the backcourt teammate of Tommy Davis of the Dodgers. Did you know that? They were the backcourt at Boys High School. And
Okay.
Tommy Davis, who went on to become a national batting champion with the Dodgers, at 346, I think, in '62. But
Wow.
he and Lenny Wilkins were teammates. Lenny goes to Providence, where he's a star, and then he goes into the NBA in 1960, and one of the great point guards of all time. And then about being a coach of Sonics. Oh yeah, and a totally wonderful human being. One of the nicest people you're ever going to meet, Lenny Wilkins. Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that statue out there. So I'm going to ask you. I know it's hard. We know that Phil Jackson has the hardware. Chuck Daly doesn't, but one had Michael and the other one didn't. Although
Right.
Isaiah wasn't bad either. But if you compare and contrast Chuck Daly and Phil Jackson, who would you lean toward it? Who would you want to have?
Well, I mean, I was a friend of Chuck's,
Okay.
so I ought to recuse myself. They're both great coaches in their own way, and I'm not going to denigrate Phil Jackson in any way.
Right.
The job he did,
Yeah.
because he took over a Bulls team that Doug Collins couldn't squeeze out of it what he should have. And I like Doug
Right.
Collins too, personally. I knew him, but I had a very, very, very small nodding acquaintance with Jackson, but I had a very good one with Chuck. So I'm not the wrong guy to ask in that regard. But obviously Phil did the job that he was asked to do. And here's the thing I want to stress on that. Who hired him? Who identified him? Who propagated him when not everybody understood what he was able to do? It was Jerry Krause, the much maligned Jerry Krause.
Right.
The most unfortunately abused person in NBA history in the front office due to that stupid television, show. I'm telling you, Jerry Krause, he identified Phil Jackson, and he was and he propagated him, and he made it possible for Phil Jackson to have the career that he had.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, these days an NBA player has to play in 65 games to be eligible for an award. I mean,
Don't you think that there should be some kind of some kind of standard? You don't think so?
Does it really come down? Well, but it leads me to this, Bob. Load management? I mean, once upon a time, this league
They're
was
trying to address load management with that. They have to address it.
Right, I know.
Assume that that's the reason it exists, because they're load management.
Right.
You have to make a number. They at least got to play 65 games, because that was never. We talked earlier about Bird, Magic, and Michael.
Right.
Check out their numbers, and they're not just, and they're hardly unique. In those days, those guys, they wanted to play 82. They wanted to, and they were upset when they didn't. Unless it was a debilitating injury, they were playing every single game. And that's the way, that's who they were. So, the idea of guys winning a chair. Now, I got to admit, one of my guys, once again, Bill Walton, when he was MVP in 78, 77, 78, I'm not sure how many games he played. Probably didn't play more than 65 games. That was the big minimum. All right. So I got to, but that I'm all for that, Scott. I'm sorry. I want some kind of standard for somebody to win an award.
Well, you know what, Bob? I wanted 70. Okay, that's just me.
Is that where you're going? Okay.
No. So here, let me put this here. Okay, no, hey, you know what? That's what makes up. Every time you and I talk, we always have these kind of stimulating conversations. I wanted 70. I thought 65 was clean.
Well, my point is I want something.
I wanted 70. But here, get this. Okay, but here's a crazier stat, okay? And that's this. There were 569 players who played in an NBA game this season, and 29.7% were eligible for an award. This is a bad look. Really, seriously, really. I do have a hat for that, by the way.
Wow.
I was going, I wanted 70. I thought 65 was being too nice.
I'm with you now. That's a staggering statistic. I was unaware of it.
No, well,
okay, that's a staggering.
Bob, I do my homework on these things. How long have you known me now? Have you ever seen me go into an interview where I don't do my homework?
You get a good applause for that.
Thanks. And I'm not looking for a compliment. I'm just saying, I always believe the one thing that's important in this business, if you don't do your homework, you're in trouble. That's all. I wanted 70. I didn't want 65. That would get off too easy.
Okay.
But that's okay. I'm glad you see where I was going with this thing. It's all good. Candy has to live with me all the time, and she says, "Yeah, you never know what this motor mouth is up his baggage. No, but somebody's got to put up with me. So, all right, you were dancing around this. Now we're going to hit it, okay? Adam Silver is thinking about a 16-team NBA Europe. Can you see this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I saw it.
Successful?
I read up on this today with the European side of it view, and they're wary. Naturally, they think they're building up their own world, and they're a little wary of it. But they respect the NBA. They want to be consulted. They want to be. I don't know that it's needed. I think they're doing fine on their own. I'm a little wary of it. I don't think it's needed. I think myself right now, you have to convince me because I think the European basketball is growing, and I don't see why the NBA has to encroach. So, but that's my first instinct. Is this something I need to learn? Fine, that's fine. But my first instinct is I don't think it's necessary. Play your exhibition games. You're playing real regular season games this year. Memphis and Orlando are playing in Berlin and London. And you want to do some of that periodically, that's fine. That's my feeling. But I'm not digging in. I want to hear more. I want to hear more rationale why they need to do this and encroach and instead of letting EuroLeague do their own stuff.
No, I agree. I mean, there are a lot of great international. I wasn't sure really what to think of this whole thing. Would it be interesting if the NBA had a 16 team league out there? I don't know.
I mean, but I think
but
things are growing in Europe year by year, and the fact that they're going to assume they're going to have interest in Berlin and London, just stay with that. I don't want to. I'm wary. That's all. I'm not digging in like crazy, but I'm a little suspicious.
Well, a couple of things I was worried about is number one, the NBA Cup or playing that tournament during the midseason, let alone a play-in tournament.
Yeah.
Maybe I can see that a little. But what are your thoughts about what he's done with those two?
Well, that's kind of the way of the world now, and I don't like the in-season tournament. I think it's totally stupid and unnecessary.
Right.
I don't like it. I hate it. I won't say I don't pay any attention the last 2 years, but I've paid minimal attention, and I don't even know who won this year. Lakers won the first one, right? I think 24.
Yeah, I thought Milwaukee won one.
Who won this year? I have no idea. That just shows you all you need to know. I don't give a damn.
Well, there you go. That's good
Who
enough for
cares?
me. I don't either.
What is the point? I don't get it. I'm sorry. See me when we get the playoffs started. Now I don't care about that thing.
Oh, I'm with you. So why do you think NBA ratings are down?
I don't know. Well, there's so many additional ways for people to entertain themselves. I mean, I don't know how they're down, but down compared to what? They're still pretty good, but I don't know. I know what I'd love to think, but I know it's not wrong. I'd love to think is that people are rebelling against the hostile takeover of the 3-point shot, but I'm in a minority. I know that.
Well, me too. I think the 3-point shot is ruining the game because everybody can just take the shot. I like the old-fashioned way where you had the 3-point play, drive to the basket, and get the foul.
It's distorted the game at every level.
Yeah,
and you see 8 and 10-year-old kids now growing up taking 3-pointers, clunching. No, I don't like it. I think it's distorted the game. But I know I'm in the minority.
I met Charles Barkley a few years ago at our event out in North Carolina, and I gave him a big hug. I said, Chuck, thanks for saying everything on the planet that all of us want to say about the planet. And so I told him, and he said, no problem. And we took a picture. He's in my book. And of course, I have a story of you in my book, which I gave you anyway. But of course, you have 9 million books there. Who knows where it's at? I don't care. As long as I gave it to you, that's all that matters. but what are your thoughts about what Charles Barkley has meant to the game, not only when he played the game, but what he's done after his career as an announcer and what they've done over on TBS and all that?
I can't say that I'm going to agree with everything he says, but I appreciate his right to say it. And I love the fact that he's totally unfiltered. And that means that you can be reckless. Sometimes you can go up to base and not, but he's not afraid of anything, and that's cool. He's not afraid. Obviously, he's got a professional life to protect, but he's confident enough that he can say what he says and does what he does and still have a viable life on television. I always enjoyed Charles when he played and on and off the court. And so I'm kind of with him. You got to be, sometimes he borders on recklessness at times.
Mhm.
I agree. But we love having an unfiltered tongue out there that not afraid to say things. So so far, I'm still with Charles.
What about Isaiah Thomas? We talked about him. I always love Isaiah. I think he's a great point guard. There's no question in my mind that he's ruffled a few feathers in his day, but what he did make the Pistons relevant with the Bad Boys when they had a really bad history, and gave them a little tradition with Daly and the rest of that Bad Boys group. But Isaiah,
His mix. I had at one point we had a nice little relationship, and he actually once invited me out to dinner in Detroit before he was planning to join up with the new Toronto franchise, and was explaining the whole thing. And I got a story for the Globe thanks to Isaiah's generosity.
right,
His history in New York was bad,
right.
and he didn't have a good history in New York with the Knicks and the office, and he has to live with that. I'm sorry. His history with the Continental Basketball Association was horrible. He has to live with that. So I'm just a mixed feelings about Isaiah. If we were to meet, I always loved this company. We had a great time talking, but there's a mixed history there. So I'm a little ambivalent about Isaiah.
That's okay, fair enough. Luka Doncic, get this, is expected to decline his 28-29 player option and can sign a $400 million plus deal with the Lakers in 2028. Could become the first $80 million player. Gosh.
On these numbers, the NBA and all sports, but the NBA's had these monopoly numbers, growing by our standards of the times. I well remember when John Havlicek was offered $250,000 to jump to the ABA, and said no, $250. Imagine that. That's tip money. But I lived through all that, and the numbers now are just staggering. But as far as Doncic's concerned, I'm going to keep my eye on the Lakers all year. They got my attention. They have unofficially anointed him as and I hate this phrase, but you're going to hear it and you can't get away from it, the face of the franchise.
Right.
We never had that phrase in the old days. We didn't need it, but they got that. I'm wondering how this is going over with the existing face of the franchise. The 20 plus year veteran, super duper, LeBron James. And apparently they have a good partnership on the court, and I trust they do off. But the Lakers are anointing him. They're going out of their way to canonize or crown Doncic. Meanwhile, Doncic, and that I'm like this to see him. We've all read about this new body transformation and how he's finally gotten fitness religion after all these years, and is making a profit out of Nico Harrison back in Dallas when he told the world one of the reasons he was willing to trade Doncic was he wasn't in shape. They should have been. So the Lakers they're always a soap opera, Scott. But this year, they got my attention. I want to see how it all works out. I really do. And I want to see how Doncic plays and whether this means, will he actually play some defense now? Will he actually use this newfound mobility to move side to side and play a little defense? Because he's been a one-way player. There's no doubt about it. And now maybe he's got the physical capability to try to play a different kind of defense. We'll see. So I'm really anxious to see them play and to see how it all works out.
I think another individual will probably grab even more headlines next season is Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, number one, I love watching the guy play, and he lead the Milwaukee Bucks. I know he wants to stay there. Where do you think Giannis ultimately lands?
Well, this is the great soap opera. Are they going to trade him? And hey, if they want to do it, they better do it pretty soon. He's 31, right? He's getting up there, and they're not going to win. They're not going to win a championship anytime soon. That window, in my opinion, is closed. So are they best off letting him go somewhere where he might be the missing piece for somebody else or not? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to play it out. But I'm with you. I love watching them. Yeah. And I laugh about, we talk about the Euro step, and I said, with him, it's the Euro gallop. He goes from the top of the key to top of the key. He goes from midcourt to the basket about 3 steps, and there's an extra step in there. But he's a remarkable player. He's a historic player, and but in terms of championship, I think that window's closed, and I don't know whether their best deal let him play it out. It's up to or what he feels his best deal is to let it play it out and be a Milwaukee lifer, or have one more fling with someone else. That's still an open question.
I know, that's why I asked it to you. I mean, you're right. I don't know what we're going to find out.
No,
I really don't. I think it's a TBD if we ever saw one. So we had the process of Joel Embiid. Didn't seem to work out too well. I feel bad for him because a lot of these big guys who are bulky, that have a lot of ability, many of them just get banged up and they can't really, their careers are just not totally filled. But
well, we know, all right, Embiid, it's a matter of how often you're going to get him on the court. He definitely, that's his issue. The game we have when he's out there, he's a wonderful player. He's a Hall of Fame player. He doesn't have to worry about. Start preparing the acceptance speech in Cooperstown. I would say, Cooperstown in Springfield. Start preparing that acceptance speech. Okay, but he hasn't won one in Philly, and there's none on the horizon. There's no championship on the horizon. Now the East is not great; it's not loaded or anything else at all. But they're not. I don't think people are looking at them as a serious threat to win anything soon. So he's going to go along and put up his numbers. He's 31. I know that,
right.
And that could be a long way to go. Big men often last. Robert Parrish went over 40, and so did Kevin Willis and Kareem. They all did. You can do it, but he plays a different kind of game than they played. It's not a low post set up shop game. It's a up and down game and a perimeter game. So I hope people appreciate him though. I don't want him taking a bum rap. I think he's a remarkable player. When he's on his game, he's unstoppable. I like watching.
So from an overall standpoint, do you think the process failed, knowing that they did a lot of losing?
They tried, and it didn't hit the. Now they tried. They brought in George, and that didn't work. And I got Maxey. I'm a member of the Maxey fan club. Trust me, I'm a big Maxey fan, and they're going to be. I don't know if they're a 50-win team. I don't know. I doubt that, but they're going to be a team. You're not going to say, "Oh, goody, we're playing the Sixers." Trust me, but they're not winning a championship.
Yeah, I mean, the process produced Ben Simmons. We know how that all worked out. This guy here, to me, to this point, I think he's a bust. I really do. That's not to say that it won't change down the road if he gets in the right situation and he gets his attitude together. Markelle Fultz was there, and that didn't really work out well. So all you have really left with that is Joel Embiid. So to me, that whole experiment of
didn't work. No, they tried.
It really didn't work at all.
It didn't work.
No, it just didn't. Lose a lot of games, and that's what you have to show for it. I know this is probably the most unfair question, considering you've covered the game forever, but try to do it anyways. Your top 10 players of all time, and where does LeBron James, does he even make the top 10 or 20? I mean, I know I hated bringing it up, but let's face it.
I think that the two greatest virtuoso individual. I start with this. Any ranking of the top 10 and even the top 5, maybe, you have to have the 3 centers.
Okay.
You got to have them. So, no, whether it's Russell, Kareem, or Wilt, it's your guy. You got to have them. So they're there. Then you got Mike and that as centers. Position players beyond center, clearly Michael and LeBron. And I'm a Michael guy because though LeBron is bigger, stronger, faster, better rebounder, better passer, if I'm playing for my life tonight, I want Michael Jordan playing for my life. LeBron is not that killer instinct. Doesn't have it. It did, never will, the way Michael did. Okay? So there's 5. Okay? Magic, Bird, Magic, whichever you want. 6, 7. Okay? Duncan. Now we're up to 8.
Okay.
Kobe has to be there.
I agree.
Now we're up to 9. And now, oh my God, you got 3 great 60s, 70s guys that one of whom is not appreciated the way he should be, that are in the same cluster. Oscar Jury and John Havlicek, who was better in the last 5 years of his career than those two guys, and people don't realize this. So there's their 8, 9, 10. I mean, they're 9, 10, 11. Excuse me, and there you go. Whatever order you want to put them in, but those are the names I'm throwing out there for you.
I love that list. That is a great list.
Now, other big the others receiving votes. Elijah Wan,
Mhm.
Kevin Durant. This is great.
Right.
So I'm gonna throw him in there. The name that people put in there that does not belong, and I'm going to be emphatic, is Shaq. Shaq did not get out of his career what he should have, and technically, the big argument with Shaq, how could he never once lead the league in rebounds? And it wasn't a priority. It was not the priority that it should be with that body and that technique and that talent and that skill and that. But the number one rule of rebounding: do you want the damn ball or don't you? And Shaq did not thirst to get the ball. You could throw Moses up in there, by the way, and he did. He's the antithesis of that. Moses Malone wanted every rebound he could grab in the next 20-foot radius. But so anyway, that's off the top of my head. That's my guys. But I'm very adamant about right through 7 and 8, and with Kobe and Duncan, right up to 9. I'm definitely sure about that.
I mean, I'm old enough to appreciate what Oscar Robertson did in this league. He's unbelievable.
This is what happens when time goes on, and those of us who were fortunate enough to see these guys know how good they were. Oscar was a perfect talent and everything about it. And Jerry West was incredible competitor and so anyway.
And I'm not really ready to put anybody from this generation as a different animal yet. I mean, Steph Curry might be a guy you could.
All right, Curry, I got it. Curry's right there, and before and ultimately, we know that Jokic is going to be there. He's going to enter into the discussion, definitely. And Kobe has depth. I would say, you know what? I'll just arbitrarily say Kobe there's a cluster there. If you want to put Kobe and that Havlicek, Weston, Oscar fight it out, fine. But right, you can't deny Kobe because he is the most influential player of the 21st century. I mean, his 3-point shooting has influenced the entire basketball world, not only domestically but internationally. Everybody wants to be Kobe. Everybody wants to come out shooting threes. Kobe is the gold standard. He's the model. He's the reason. And so you can't deny his impact. It's extraordinary. And not to mention how good he is, period.
All right, so we talked about international play, but if the NBA were to go with 2 teams, where are you going?
What do you mean?
Franchises. You're going to award 2 more franchises.
Oh, 2 more? Oh,
yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah.
1. Unquestioned Seattle.
Yeah.
I stick up for Buffalo, but I don't know if they still want one. I don't know. They got screwed. There's no reason. The only reason they lost the franchise was that bad owners. That's it. They were a very viable franchise. They had just had some successful seasons, and then the owners stupidly traded away Bob McAdoo, which alienated people, and then John Y. Brown was a horrible owner, and they wound up winding up. They're the Clippers, and they shouldn't be, but they are. Okay, but Seattle number 1. I don't know. I mean, Louisville, maybe. I don't know. Who?
You know what? I've always thought that Kentucky should get another team. I really do.
Yeah.
They had the Kentucky Colonels many years ago.
I know.
I think that would be a team that they should get. Everybody's talking about Vegas. But, I'm sorry. I don't buy Vegas.
No, it's going. Vegas is the hot. Everybody's going to Vegas, but how big is that area, that metropolitan area? How many teams can they support? Now they're going to have a baseball team. They got a football team. They got a hockey team. They got the UNLV. How many teams can they support? You're going to throw a basketball team in there too? But maybe they will. I don't know. But unquestionably Seattle, because they never deserved to lose their team. It was the problem about getting an arena. And then Clay, what's his name? The guy that
I Bennett, I believe, right?
Bennett. He came in and he was going to move him, and he moved him back where his town. And they're a great addition to the league. Nothing wrong with Oklahoma City. God knows it's a wonderful franchise. So they belong. I'm not disputing them for a moment, but it shouldn't have been at Seattle's expense,
I agree.
in my opinion. That's all.
Totally agree. I always thought that Seattle got the wrong end. I think the problem is they self-destructed because they kept bickering around about the stadium. Now they finally got it right.
They
and
had
they had
built
one too.
they were victim of that, but they were a very, very worthy franchise.
Yeah, no, I think they should never have left either. I'm just glad that the WNBA still has a team there, so there's some basketball, let
Yeah.
alone the fact that the Sonics do belong back, and that's why I mentioned Lenny Wilkins. So I agree with you, but I believe Louisville should get the team. I really totally do, and honor the Kentucky Colonels. Listen, you got a team in Indiana. Why wouldn't you have one in Kentucky?
We're on the same page there.
Yeah, we sure. So let's talk about the best rivalries in basketball. Boston and the Lakers, we all know. Detroit and Boston, I'm always going to like that one because that was some pretty nasty rivals there. And of course, the Detroit Lakers, when you look at them in the finals, Detroit has 2-1 edge over the Lakers in the finals.
That was a great era in the late 80s, right?
Wasn't it? Yeah. So would you want to add to that total? You have Boston, the Lakers.
The Celtics have been fortunate to have multiple ones. Philadelphia, Boston, Philly was wonderful, particularly ultimately first with the Wilt era and then with the Dr. J era. Boston and LA, of course, goes without saying. We know that. Boston and New York in the early 80s were one of my favorite rivalries ever. The Boston Garden and the New York and Massacre Garden were electric where those teams played in the early 70s. Okay. Right. In late 60s, early 70s. Those were great. That was a great rivalry. I'll tell you, it was a wonderful rivalry for a while. Was Portland and Seattle when Seattle existed? I know that I was out there for some of that stuff. It was wonderful. I don't know that L.A. and San Francisco were how heated that may be. I don't know, but I don't think so. I don't know. Other than that, I'm open to suggestion because I don't know. But the ones I know, I know the ones I know, and that's the ones with the Celtics have had multiple ones but in the heartland, I don't know if there's any great rivalries, in the heartland. But people would have to educate me.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, I know Detroit, Chicago was one when things were going well.
At that point, right, when you had the Jordan rules and that whole thing, and that point, there were things come and go in that regard, no question. But ongoing, the longest standing is still Boston, LA.
Yeah, and I think when the Knicks are relevant, New York and Boston could get really nasty.
Right. I think it's so good when the Knicks are good. It's important to the league. It gives everybody a target. Either love them or hate them, but it's good. I think it's really good to have the Knicks. Very important for the Knicks to be good.
So, I'll only talk about one more basketball topic, but obviously one that's really unbelievable. You had an incredible run with the Boston Celtics. What's it like for you over the years to be able to cover a franchise that has the most NBA championships in the storied history that they have?
Well, first of all, people care, and you're plugging into a history and people care. So you're serving a constituency that really appreciates the topic and what you're doing. I lucked into this. Remember, I grew up in New Jersey. Okay. I came up to Boston in 1964 as a student at Boston College, and I was well aware of the Celtics. I hated the Celtics. I was a 76er fan. Insofar as I was an NBA fan, I was a 76er fan. My passion at the time was college. And I got to Boston College, and we were very good over my 4 years, Bob Cousy's teams. We went to 2 NITs when it mattered, 2 NCAAs, and I went to Celtic games, a lot of Celtic games with my friends. But what we did was this. We circled remember the double headers? We circled the double header dates and the Laker dates and Philly with Wilt when they had Wilt. And that's the games that we would go to. And you go for $2 on the second balcony of the Garden, $2, and get a ticket to an NBA double headers or to the Celtics Lakers or the Celtics Sixers. Okay. But I didn't root for them. I rooted against them totally all the time because I was from Jersey. And long story short, but I became, in 1969, they handed me the Celtic beat. I was 23 years old. Bob Sales, who was a wonderful writer and later became the sports editor of the Boston Herald, left the beat to go to the news side of the Globe. And they had a vacancy and they had no heir apparent. And I must have said, well, I guess the kid likes basketball. We'll give him a shot. And I went up covering the Celtics for 7 years at that point. And that's how I got immersed in the NBA. And the Celtics were on the first year was the first year post Bill Russell and Sam Jones. They won
Okay.
34 games. They weren't very good, but they did. And people don't realize this. That was the year of the great Knicks team. I think the most important team in the development of the NBA history was the 70 Knicks, because they made the world pay attention thanks to Madison Square Avenue, you know, and everything else. Okay. But the Celtics won the season series. They actually beat them 4 games out of 7 that year. People don't know that. So anyway, and then next year, Dave Cowens came and the Celtics started to take up. And I rode that wave. I rode that wave, and the Globe gave me a license to write the way I wanted. And I was able to attract attention, whatever, from my coverage of the team. That was extraordinarily important to me. And that set the table for me for my entire writing career, was covering those Celtics. I'm eternally grateful for those guys. And Havlicek, Sanders, Nelson, Cowens, JoJo White, Don Chaney, etc., Steve Kapersky, all those guys. That team got me a chance to write about them and get known. And so I owe them. And that's what launched my career.
Unbelievable. Sorry, I want to go back to rivalries real quick because we talked about the pros. But anytime you have Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Kansas, they're always a good rivalry. Whoever they play, are there any other teams? I know UCLA, you put them in there. That's not bad either. But can you think of any other rivalries that stand out amongst the college ranks?
Oh, well, of course, you know, Duke Carolina is number one. Right. Unarguably. Nobody can touch Duke Carolina. That's number one. After that, you know, you got your regional, you got your various regional ones. And we know in football it's Ohio State, Michigan, but I don't know if that transcends into basketball. I don't think it does for them. It's all about football. And basketball, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a very good question. Oh, I know one people don't know about, and it's had its Xavier and Cincinnati.
Okay.
That is a passionate rivalry, to my knowledge. Another one that people don't realize is BYU and Utah. They don't like each other. They don't like each other. Trust me. And that's a rivalry. And you always have USC and UCLA in anything, you know. But in basketball, it's Duke Carolina and nobody close. That's it. Now, when I grew up, there was one very good one where I grew up, St. Joe's and Villanova. That's when I was weaned on. Okay. But that's no longer the viable rivalry that it once was. But it was in the 60s. Trust me on that. And oh my, that was a big deal. But I'm telling you, the answer is Duke and Carolina. But I'm telling you about Xavier, Cincinnati, and BYU and Utah. They don't like each other.
Yeah, I think in college football, number one easily is Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, everybody knows that. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk about the fact that you actually, the books you've written, one of them you co-authored with Larry Bird.
Yeah.
And let me tell you a Bird story, and I want you to talk about some of your books. Now we have an opportunity to promote you a little bit about what you've done, because this is really cool stuff. I'll never forget the time I'm covering a Pistons and a Pacers game. Bird is the coach for the Pacers. I don't remember the score. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. I'm over covering the Pacers side. After the game was over, okay, Bird was talking to the beat writers. You know how all that stuff goes. Okay. So I politely asked Bird, Coach Bird, can I ask you a question not related to basketball? I said, sure. Because you know darn well he's very polite and very nice. Okay. At least my dealings with him were really, really good.
Uh-huh.
So Coach Bird, I know you weren't the best athlete on the planet, you know, so I'd be very polite about it. But what made you better than a lot of the players that you played against? And in a very polite voice, and he said, I called out my name, Scott. All I did was think 3 steps ahead of the other people, and I outthought people. And I'm going to tell you something, Bob. When he told me that, I'll tell you, let's not kid ourselves. Us as writers can learn from coaches too. They don't just coach players, they coach people like us and ask questions, because you never know what we're going to put in our repertoire, right, Bob? And when Coach Bird told me that, I thank this end. Coach Bird, thank you very much. I really appreciate the information and the advice.
That's a great answer.
Yeah,
And
it
so
was.
true.
That's what he told, but isn't that the type of answer he would tell you anyway? He knows he wasn't a good athlete. He'll admit it. All he was is a blue collar gym rat that took shots whenever. But he was a thinking man's player. That's why, you know, his composure behind the bench is great. But he just thought 3 steps ahead of everybody. And the way he answered that to me, is I think the three
And he
steps.
did it at 6'9", and if he had
Yeah.
been 6'5", you know who he would have been? Bill Bradley.
Yeah.
He would have been
yeah.
Bill Bradley at 6'5", but he was Larry Bird. The additional size, he could rebound better, see the floor better for passing, you know, but that's, I'm glad to hear you say that. That's great because
Well, he
He
was
did.
great. It was a big thrill for me for him to say that. Now I'm putting you on the spot, okay? As I have all show. I know you've written a lot of books, but talk about the one that you co-authored with Larry Bird, and then you can proceed to talk about the other ones.
it was I spent a full week in French Lick with Bird, and the way you do a book with a jock or somebody, a collaborator, is, you know, you tape record these interviews, and then you get the interviews transcribed, and then you go and you write the book, and you try to write the book as much as possible with their verbatim quotes and their thoughts, and in the style that they, you know, that they're to reflect them, and it's not you that's writing it. You're trying to put yourself in their persona. It was my first book. My second book, my first one of that nature was with John Havlicek, and I learned, you know, how to hopefully how to do it. So that's how you do it. And we hung out for a full week and made all these tapes, and then I went on and wrote the book, and we had overseer Bob Wolf, his agent, wanted very definitely wanted this book to be a certain tone. And I think I was kidded that he wanted a book that a grandmother would appreciate. He didn't want Larry coming off too coarse or too rough, or he wanted, you know, and he wanted to make sure that this book came out the way. And so he had his little say in matters. But I loved working with Larry. Larry was easy and fun to work with, no problem.
Yeah, like I said, my experience with Coach Bird, and I'm going to call him Coach Bird because
Yeah.
he is. There's something else. I have a coach in my backyard that I really admire named Mike Jarvis. I don't know whether you ever in touch with him.
Oh, I knew Mike back in high school.
He's in my backyard. I've had him on my show quite a few times. He was a heck of a coach for sure. So you work with Around the Horn, pardon the interruption, and the sports reporters. Tell me what it was like there. The shows I really liked the best really were the sports reporters and, pardon the interruption, Around the Horn. I wasn't sure if I understood the scoring system as well.
No.
But I don't think anybody ever did. But what are your thoughts about the fact that you were able to work on those three particular shows?
I was very lucky. In 1989, I got a call from Joe Valerio, who I had known as a writer with the New York Post. And then he left the New York Post and went into television producing and worked with both ABC and CBS. And now in 1989, he had taken over purchased the rights to a new show that had been on for a year called The Sports Reporters with ESPN. And the format was that they would have a host and 3 writers, and we would talk on Sunday morning about sports. And he invited me, and I became a member of the show, and I worked there for 28 years. And we would get it. And Dick Schaap was our original host, and there was nobody like Dick Schaap. I would say Dick Schaap was the greatest writer among broadcasters and the greatest broadcaster among writers. He wrote over 30 books, and a majority of them were not sports books. He was famous for some of the sports books he wrote, including Instant Replay with Jerry Kramer, one of the great sports books of all time. And just a superb, wonderful man, and a quintessential New Yorker. And so I did that show. And then when Dick passed in 2001, we got John Saunders.
Yeah, he was great.
And John was a wonderful host, a Canadian from Montreal, who was a hockey guy at heart. And he had made himself into an American sports guy, particularly basketball, and just a decent human being, wonderful guy. So I went up doing that show for 28 years. And you go in there on Sunday morning, and you'd have your bagels and coffee, and you'd go over the format. You were going over the format over the week with Joe Valerio, who was the producer, and we knocked out the show, and we'd be walking out of there by 7:30. And the show would air about 10 or 11 o'clock. So that was 28 years of that. And that was something.
John Saunders is a treasure.
And PTI, I filled in for Mike on vacation time for Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser on PTI for about 15 years. And then, but then along the way in 2002, a new show came along called Around the Horn, and it was a spin-off of PTI, and the success that Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser had, and they wanted to kind of co-opt a similar audience. And we came on the air in November of 2002, and we lasted until May 23rd of this year.
Right.
And that's a very, very good run. And the original host was Max Kellerman.
I remember.
After a year, Max left because he had a contract he signed with Fox. And this young man out of Fordham, who had been a researcher and had been the stat boy for Tony and Mike, Tony Reale, they gave him a trial as our new host. That trial lasted 20 years, 22 years.
Wow.
He never relinquished. He was natural. People don't understand that complexity of that hosting job. That, I believe, is the hardest hosting job in television that there was doing that show. Because in addition to the normal hosting duties, keeping the flow and the commentary and having the thing in your ear with the producer and the director, you have to keep score, monitor these things, do that mute button, all that stuff. And it's not easy. And he made it seem very easy. And he was his ad-libbing was great because he really knew the sports. He was a wonderful guy. And Tony Reale was the key to that show continuing to enjoy the success. We started out with 5 writers, 5 guys from 5 columnists from America, all over. Myself in Boston, Jay Mariotti in Chicago, Woody Page in Denver, Tim Cowlishaw in Dallas, and TJ Simers in LA. And after about a few months, TJ didn't like this. He wasn't happy. He left. And, but now, by the time the show ended in May, we had ballooned to, there were over 20 different panelists. And we had ballooned to women, African Americans, internationals of all kind. We had expanded the scope of from just white male sports columnists into the full spectrum of people that are covering sports, which was a good idea. And that the show had expanded, and you know, it's going to be missed. I think that was a nice addition to the whole team.
You know, my Sundays are like Candy will tell you this right now. My routine was watching Outside the Lines with Bob Lee, who I had a chance to meet over at our event in NSMA. Bob, well, I love Bob. He's, to me, as old school as you can get. And when it comes to journalism 101, he's it. I actually came across Stephen A. Smith at the Super Bowl. I don't mind Stephen A. at all. I just get a little tired of the flamboyant yelling. It's a little too much for me to take, but I understand that he's very prepared when he does things. So I'm not going to knock the guy. And I don't know. I've been lately dealing with a lot of headaches, Bob. And I'll be upright right now that I was recently diagnosed with the onset of Alzheimer's disease at the end of last year. But I'm doing okay because I'm taking the right medication, Bob. I am. I'm active doing these types of shows. I go to a lot of events. So I'm really susceptible to yelling. It triggers my mind a little bit. So I have nothing against Stephen A. personally, and he was nice enough to take a photo with me, but I love Bob Lee. I really do. And Outside the Lines and the Sports Reporters are the 2 shows I would wake up to every Sunday because you worked with my old colleague, Mitch Album, who started, believe it or not, in Fort Lauderdale.
Mitch he joined on fairly early, and of course he became a staple. Bill Conlon was another longtime staple of the show. And but Mitch, Mitch was one. And in the end, you know, Mitch, Mike, and I did many shows together. No question.
Yeah, you had a great group. You talk about Hall of Fame writers. You definitely had it there. So that was what I loved about it. And then, of course, as I've gotten to know you over the years, I'm always saying, hey, this guy's my buddy, and I'm proud of it. You know what I'm saying? Because when you have a history that goes back to when we were in Auburn Hills, and let alone we pick it up many years later. So that leads me to this. Okay. Everybody has mentors. I know you're working in Boston with the Celtics. Are there any particular people that you view as mentors that helped you get where you were at that you want to acknowledge?
At the Boston Globe, there were a couple of people that I tried to learn from and just hang on him. One was Bud Collins, the great Bud Collins, who was, people got to know him and nationally as a tennis commentator for NBC, but started out as a columnist in Boston at All Sports, and uh, just fascinating guy, a very unique guy. Not sure I shouldn't say that, a unique guy. Bud was one, and Ray Fitzgerald was a columnist in Boston that was a complete gentleman and just a great way about him. He died prematurely in '92, and but those two, but Bud, I'm so proud to have known Bud, and arguably the best American tennis writer of all time, and then he also became a television personality.
So when I mentioned these names, Will McDonough, Lee Nordtville, and Peter Gammons, what
Well,
entered
Peter
your
and
mind?
Will, of course, was the greatest reporter that we've ever known in Boston. He reported, he was able to get stories and ingratiate himself with the jock world the way no other writer could. And there's no question about that. He was the king of getting stories. Peter and I met on June 10th, 1968 as summer interns. We were part of the 1968 summer intern class at the Boston Globe. And he was a kid from North Carolina. He was a Tar Heel. We had one thing in common. We were fellow preppies. He was going to Groton School in Groton, Mass. I'd gone to Lawrenceville School, Lawrenceville, New Jersey. So we had this preppy background. And but we also bonded over A, baseball primarily, and B, basketball. He's a Tar Heel, so he had to love his Tar Heels, and he did. But he was a baseball guy at heart, and he went on to become one of the greatest baseball writer Boston ever knew. And of course, he worked for ESPN and other entities for years and years as a commentator, and wrote many books. But he and I have been friends since 1968.
Yeah, I met Peter actually at Fort Lauderdale when the Orioles trained there. He was a super nice guy. He gave me whatever time I needed to talk. And I pick, when it comes to people like you, Peter, and a lot of the older guys, I'm always going to ask questions and try to pick your brains, because I've always been a firm believer. I want to keep learning from the best, and that's how I try to tell a lot of the people that work under me. So tell me, we haven't talked much about hockey, okay? And we may only have one topic pertaining to it. How much does the original six mean to the NHL? When the original six teams get in, I know I'm a Red Wings guy, you're a Bruins guy, but the original six is really where to me is what hockey's all about. Listen,
there's a dwindling number of us who remember it and care about it, and we're clinging on to that. But what can I say? It was a totally different world, but the NHL has expanded beyond anyone's comprehension from in 1966 or 7 when it happened. And I came to Boston. I wasn't a big hockey fan, but you cannot live in Boston and be unaware of the Bruins. And if you're a sports writer, and I went up becoming a columnist for 23 years, you have to cope with hockey. And I always say I learned hockey. The other sports I knew from the inside out. Growing up, baseball my whole life, basketball, playing a ton of basketball. Football, you're aware of football, you're around football your whole life, Hockey, different. I've been on skates and I've had a hockey stick in my hand, but never at the same time. So I've never played hockey. Now, at my prep school, we had hockey, and I went to BC. And even my freshman year, I went to the national championship game. We played in Providence against Michigan Tech. Unfortunately, the final score was 9-2 in favor of Michigan Tech. Tony Esposito in the goal. But my then girlfriend and my wife of 56 years was a hockey fan from her father, and BC. So in Boston, you're immersed in a hockey culture. But I never learned the game. I don't have the nuances to the game, and I always found it difficult to write hockey. I really sweated out all the times I had to write hockey, I think it's the hardest game to write. You have to really know the game. Which if it's 1-0 or 2-1, you can't just write about the 3 goals. You got to know something else was going on. It's not that easy if you don't understand the game. And I did not have the nuances of the game. So hockey was a struggle. But the Bruins provided me with some, and I'm so pleased that in 2011, Scott, when they went all the way and went to Vancouver and won, I was around. And I was there tonight in Vancouver when they won. So I can say that I have written the championship game for each of the 4 teams. And very few people can say that, because very few people are fortunate enough to have that opportunity. Think about it. How many people, you think in America, writers, columnists, have written a column, the championship game for each of the four major sports. Very
Right.
few, because you
That's true.
don't have that opportunity that often. So I was really grateful to be on that ride with the Bruins in 2011. And by the way, on the way there, in
Yeah.
Game 7 against Tampa Bay,
Hmm.
1-0 game with no penalties. And it's the greatest hockey game I ever saw in my life.
Okay.
1-0, no penalties. And Guy Boucher, coach of the Lightning, said there was 60 minutes. It felt like 60 minutes of overtime. And hockey.
Wow.
And I'll say this, and you know I'm a basketball guy and I'm a baseball guy.
Right.
The greatest tension in sports that I know of is Stanley Cup overtime.
Oh, no question.
When you
about
know
that.
it could end in a flash. And you know, that is the greatest tension, the Stanley Cup overtime. I'll agree with that.
Well, I'll give you that. Okay. And then some. I think hockey's the best. The playoffs in hockey are the best of the four major sports.
I know
Knowing
people.
what they have to go
I'm
through.
not ready to concede that, but I know it's a popular thing, and I hear it. And I remember one year I did write that 1 year, and I did, and that year I thought it was. I thought the NBA had a very, very good playoffs this year, so I'm not willing to concede the title completely to the NHL because I thought the NBA this year did itself very proud in this year's playoffs.
Come on. You only talk
But-
basketball.
But I'm here to say, in general terms, hockey Stanley Cup overtime is the greatest tension. I know it's.
Oh, they're great minds think alike there. So listen, I wrote this book here based on this premise called Lessons from the Microphone, the book I wrote and I gave you and I even put you on
Yes.
it. But I based it on the premise, Bob, that old school media versus new school media, we know it's predominantly involved with social media and all that. How have you been able to, when you think of old school media and new school media, what goes through your mind? Because I enjoyed it many years ago where when you worked at a radio station, it was a privilege, not and something you don't take for granted. We had the AP, we had the wire service, we had the tickers and all that. And whereas now it's a different animal, but I appreciated the old school media because what I've learned to do myself, and I listen to you all night here, and as much as I like sports, I like to do outside of things outside of sports because that's what makes you as a well-rounded journalist. It really does. It's not the scores; it's what happens around you, wherever you're at. So, but what's your perception of what old school media versus new school media is these days when you compare and contrast the eras?
I continually say I'm glad I did it when I did it, as well
Right.
as where I did it. I would never, I couldn't have done any better than having been in Boston at the time that I spent with the things that were going on over the years in Boston. So
Right.
it worked out extremely well. I don't know what to say. I mean, I got out because it was time. I'd done everything I wanted to do for the most part, and you know I don't know the whole tension, the peripheral life, the access was diminishing. You know,
Yeah.
nobody will ever have. I keep saying, and I mean this. I'm sorry how it sounds, but nobody today, nobody will ever know the fun and have the access that we had back in the day, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The access and the relationships that we developed with the players and the people are not available. They're not available today.
Right.
And they started to change during my time when we first stopped traveling with them, and then everybody became Marriott whores, and I was one of them. Believe me. And we don't and you're not, and you're flying for points, and you're not traveling with the team anymore. And I traveled with the team, and I mean, you whenever you were with them. Well, they don't do that anymore, and you can't develop the relationships that we built, and get. And frankly, some of the stories that we got, because of it. And then the other thing is, I think that people aren't. The assumption is that television is totally dominant, and everybody's already seen the game. So if you're a newspaper writer, you're not being encouraged to write the way we wrote for game stories, particularly, which I was proud of my game stories. And I always looked at the game stories as a theater critic. And I was going to tell you, if you saw the game, I was going to flesh out from, as much as possible what you saw. And if you didn't see the game, I was going to kind of explain to you what you missed by not seeing the game. Nobody writes that way anymore. They don't. It's all about runs, how the runs were scored, and a few quotes, and laden with quotes. you know, I thought quotes should be used judiciously, and I don't think they are anymore. I think that's all. So I mean, it's different, but I mean, and anybody writing today, I feel bad for it. They don't know what we know. They'll never know what we knew. They'll never know.
Yeah. Funny how you say that too, because you know what? I know in my mind that I have about another year or two left of this anyways. And you don't get the locker room access at MLB games anymore, and they only limit you to 30, 40 minutes. I take what I can get. I don't know, maybe I'm staying in a little bit longer because I want to go out there and see if I can get one more book out of having the second part of this whole thing, finish what I have to finish. And I enjoy the relationships. It keeps me busy. It's my passion. But there's no question that stories and the relationships that we've had, to me, you can't, these kids will never experience anything that we dealt with. And I'm proud of the fact that what we did back then, you did get out at the right time, Bob. There is no question about it. You did get at the right time. But I feel like my time is coming, but there's a point when you know it's okay when to walk away. You just have to know how much you want to do going forward. And I think that I totally agree with you. There's nothing I could say that would dictate otherwise. And I love that. I'll never trade any of that for anything in the world. Being able to go in the locker rooms, you get to know people, the relationships you have with the players, the relationships you have with the coaches, and let alone the media. It's just too unbelievable. And that's the major thing that I have about writing that book. So you've taken this route yourself. So as far as I'm concerned, do you think that it's good to be a writer before you enter broadcasting, knowing that you have a full ability to know the English language well before you can actually talk about it?
Well, of course, you know, I mean, I always say that when I talk to groups of kids, mostly college, the key, I have one piece of advice: read. You should be a
Yeah.
reader. You're not, and because reading, and that goes for broadcasters too, because you want to develop a database in your brain. You never know what you're going to, when you're going to have to, what you're going to have to access when, and it's
Right.
up there that you've accumulated by reading, and you don't know when you're going to need that, and that's, so it's not just a writer, but it's a broadcaster as well. And I know many people don't think about it in terms of broadcasting and about the reading, but I'm telling you, that's a computer you have up there, and
Right.
you're filling up the computer with data and recall. So yeah, that's all. That's all I can say. Read, 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 read.
So you say read, but do you think, so I just want to make sure, yeah, there's no question that up here is your computer and your data,
Yeah.
and I agree 100% there.
You know, of
But
course,
but being a good writer, though, you say is a good way to develop your verbal communication skills in the media like broadcasting. Would you
well,
agree with
I mean,
that?
I can't speak. Look, I'm not a professional. I was never a professional broadcaster. Obviously, although I did work on television for a year and a half, but I wasn't.
Right.
I was not an anchor. I was a reporter. I did in local television, Channel 5, ABC affiliate, and I realized that that life wasn't for me. But so I did do TV for a while. But I just, that's my personal thesis. This is the theory, is that you reading is a key. I don't know what else to tell you. You know, you're going to be a fan. You're gonna
Right.
follow the
Uh-huh.
sport. You're going to accumulate. You know, look up stuff and all that. You're going to watch the games. You know, that.
Right.
And of course, when in terms of writing, I would say two things. It's a two-part word, and the first part is inherent. You're a sports fan your whole life. You watch all these games. You care. Second part is, that's the tricky part, and the
Mhm.
writing. You know, and that's where the reading links in with the writing.
Well, no, it's a fair answer. I mean, first of all, this is one of the first things you're taught as a student, as a child, is to read. You have to read first, right? And one of my mentors, actually, I know you probably heard the name Tony DeMarco, right?
Mhm.
Tony DeMarco was my mentor, and he always taught me. He gave me a sporting news one time: just read, and see what other people are doing. And then once I started reading, I started to gain ideas, and then I learned how to write because I was watching
And the
other
other thing
people to do.
is develop a historical perspective. The only way you're going to get it, you're only going to get it one way, and that's reading up on things, and
Yeah.
to get a historical perspective, so you know you have some kind of a reference that you need. I'm always very impressed when I meet over the years, when I met a young writer who who had some semblance of a historical perspective, because not everybody does, but the ones that did, I always was very happy to meet.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way, Bob. I really am. I think everything guys like, I'll tell you one thing, this show's gonna be available to a lot of students as well. That's why I'm asking these questions as detailed as I am, because it's up to our responsibility as the elder statesman in this business to try to educate the next generation to make sure they do things. The one thing I frown upon are anybody that makes factual errors. I mean, Frank Reynolds, I mentioned him in my book, during the Ronald Reagan assassination, wasn't worried about getting it first, but getting it right. And he
Yeah.
blew a gasket on the air. And when I was out at Arlington National Cemetery, I'll never forget the time when I walked by and said, Frank, you're the best. And I always kept that in my head and then proceeded to write it in my book. A few other things I want to get to. I appreciate the generosity of your time. So you obviously launched a podcast called Bob Ryan's Boston Podcast. How is that going? And then the second follow-up to that question is, please give me your thoughts about the podcasting industry in general, but how's your podcast going first?
Well, that podcast expired a number of years ago. It didn't,
Okay.
I guess we just ran out of sponsorship, and I enjoyed doing it, and I got some pretty good guests, I thought, and but it's fine, but it didn't work. I do, however, participate in two current podcasts.
Okay.
Basketball. One is called the Bob Ryan, Jeff Goodman, Gary Tangway along for the ride. That's his self-deprecating. Yeah. The three of us do a basketball podcast every week, and Gary and I separately do a basketball podcast, which focuses on the Celtics for the Celtic audience that we definitely pitch it to. So I do have the two podcasts. Podcasts in general, it's the way of the world. You know, we all know in politics, we all know that the impact of what it's done to the way that political campaigns are conducted and run, and we all know that. And in sports, obviously, they're very important. It's the world, you know, and it's the way it is. I'm happy to be a part of it. It's no heavy lifting. It's easy, you know. Just sit and talk. I have no problem. So anyway, but they're a way of life, and they're not going away. Period.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I enjoy podcasting as well. I think it's pretty interesting. I've used the ability to develop relationships over the years, and that's why I enjoy keeping my presence in this media alive. So it took me a little while. I still call podcast broadcast. Sometimes you're a creature of habit, but it is what it is. You still have a microphone in front of me.
Yeah.
I think that's really pretty cool stuff. We talked about some of the greatest players, but let's talk about some of the greatest college coaches that you've ever worked with as well. I mean, we can't leave one without the other, right?
Well, a guy that jumps out at me is Dave Gavitt, and the late Dave Gavitt, and I got to know him at Providence, and he was, he was very, very media friendly and very, very, and we hit it off. We really got along very well. Of course, he should have been the coach of the 1980 Olympic team. That's the year we boycotted after, we boycotted the Moscow Olympics. He was the coach of that team. He never got another chance to coach the team. But of course, he was the founder and the driving force behind the Big East, which was a revolutionary league in this part of the country.
Right.
He harnessed something that needed to be done and set up something very important. So he would be my, the guy that jumps out at me the most at all. I enjoyed the time when as a columnist, Jack Bicknell, the football coach at BC, when Flutie played, was a very gracious gentleman to be around. There's no question. Of course, Bob Cousy, when I was at Boston College, I was 18 years old. He was in his second year of coaching BC. The idea of getting to have a moment with the great Bob Cousy when I was 18 is just spellbinding. I mean, we've been friendly now. He'll be 97 on Saturday, August 9th.
Wow.
And he's 100% marbles. He's not mobility wise, he's not good, but he's got 100%. I'll take that trade-off. I'll sign up for that trade-off right now. Put the contract in front of me. I'll sign it. I'll take that trade-off. His mind is 100%. But Cousy, I got to know. I got Chuck Daly. We mentioned Chuck Daly.
Right.
But you said college, but I know him at BC as a college coach. That's where I met him. So, and then I later developed that relationship with the NBA. So that's the ones that jump out at me right now. I mean, but I've known, got, I didn't know him well, but I had a good relationship with Coach K, definitely. And I'll tell you another, lately, now even in retirement, because we keep in contact, oh, Jay Wright, Villanova. But
Okay.
one of my good friends now in my life is former coach at Vermont, Tom Brennan. And is a very, very sharp, interesting, funny guy who, he got out of it 20 years ago, but he made Vermont into something in that world very good. And so there's some examples right there.
Yeah, see, I had the good pleasure many years ago of interviewing John Wooden of Wizard Westwood. He's another guy I picked his brain with to have an interview somewhere, which was kind of neat. Never had a chance to meet Roy Williams and Dean Smith at all, but those guys were on. And of course, Bobby Knight. I bought his book, so everybody knows
Well,
he's a
I
little rougher.
I had a decades long up and down relationship with Mike, because that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, guys. So, did you ever have a chance to work with Bill Belichick at all?
Well, yes and no. Yeah, I was a columnist, and I didn't have. I had a couple of. My one night with him was in the Super Bowl in Jacksonville. At that point, he had a policy of one night during Super Bowl week of inviting selective media members to have dinner with he and some members of his staff. And I was selected that year and wound up at the table, head face to face with him. So I was the guy that was face to face. And we had an ice-breaking conversation with a mutual somebody that we knew, a coach I had known at my prep school, and he knew him because he was a coach in through his father, the great Steve, the great coach at Navy, and he knew. Anyway, so we sat and talked for, I had him face to face for about 2 hours, and that was that was my one and only lengthy encounter. Other than that, it was asking questions after press conferences, and you didn't get he didn't linger very much, don't worry.
Yeah.
So, but that one night I had him, it was fine. It was perfectly amenable. We hit it off. It was fine. But I don't really say I had a relationship. And the funny part about it is that he lived about 1.5 miles from where I live. He lived in my town in a gated community on a golf course. But we didn't cross paths. Nobody crossed paths with him, believe me.
I know you being in Boston. And incidentally, I was at Super Bowl 39 in Jacksonville. I covered that game. I've actually covered 5 Super Bowls, 4 games, and last year I went to New Orleans. I wasn't worried about the game. Candy had an opportunity to go with me. It was unbelievable what she did in terms of taking videos and getting all the access I was able to get. And the NFL's done a pretty good job in terms of making that event available to a lot of people. Going into the games is much more difficult, but I've been to the games anyhow.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about the Super Bowl experience per se? I know you covered a fair amount of them, but I've enjoyed it. To me, it's been a thrill, and my relationship with the NFL has been pretty good.
Well, I think it works. And people, as a writer, they provide the people. You get the stories you need, and they provide them enough. You can't argue with the access, the way they do it. You just hope that you get some people that are, willing to converse once they're dragged into here. They don't all want to be there. We know that. And but I think it works. It's people used to make fun of it, but I found it to get the work done. They present to people. You get your work done. And then it depends on what city you're in. How much beyond that, how much of a good time you have. So
I agree. I know. I have 1 or 2 more questions, and again, I appreciate the time that you addressing all of them, Tom. You're a really dear friend. Let's talk about some of the best broadcasters across all sports. I had Kenny Albert on this show a while back, and Kenny's a very good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And of course, George Blaha in Detroit. I'm sure you probably crossed paths with him a few times. And Eric Reed, I think, in Miami. But tell me some of the best national broadcasters that you've ever dealt with. Steve Holman Sr. obviously was on the show as well. But are there any particular broadcasters across sports in general?
The great Kurt Gowdy.
Yeah.
I got to know, I took some time with Kurt Gowdy. That was very pleasurable. Marv Albert, Restrictor Kenny. Marv, go back with Marv back to back naturally, but Marv goes way back. No question. You mentioned George. Yeah. I'm trying to think of way back in the beginning when I covered Andy Musser covering the 76ers was somebody I knew, and I know I'm going to forget somebody.
Well, in baseball, you got Ernie Harwell, the Tigers.
Well, Ernie, baseball. You're talking about. I'm thinking only in basketball. Oh, absolutely, Ernie Harwell. I got a picture of him in my office right here with me and him,
Oh, yeah.
and a signed photo from the year that Tiger Stadium closed. And
Yeah, 99. I was at that final
99.
game too.
My favorite ballpark ever. And my wife and I went out and spent a weekend and to say goodbye to Tiger Stadium. And I got my picture taken with Ernie and it's signed. That's for sure. Met Dick Enberg a few times. Chick Hearn. The
Oh,
Lakers, the great
geez.
Chick
Oh,
Hearn.
yeah.
Yep, absolutely, Chick Hearn, for sure. And I'm sure now when we're done,
Well, you got Dick Stockton, who's done a whale of a job.
Stockton, he was local. I knew him here very well,
Yeah,
and of course he married Leslie Visser, who was
right.
my colleague at the Globe. Absolutely, Dick Stockton. I knew him. I know him very well. And then some of the local, the local guys, of course,
Right.
But I'm just thinking anybody else.
Well, I got Brent Musburger. Where do you think he fits in
Brent.
there?
We go back. I knew Brent.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s. Absolutely. So, yeah, no question, Brent, in this heyday there. And I'm sure. Bill King in San Francisco. Do you aware of Bill King? What a character! What a wonderful character he was. Bill King in San Francisco did all three teams. Not hockey. They didn't have hockey, but they did what he did. He did, but he at one point or other he did baseball, basketball, and football, in San Francisco. Bill King was wonderful. So there's just some examples.
Yeah. Now, since I really am not worried about how many ballparks I'm going to hit for stadiums, there's only two I really want to hit now: Madison Square Garden and Fenway Park, because I'm hooked on this international travel thought. I actually had an opportunity when I was in London to go to the Chelsea Football Club stadium, and I took some pictures and took a lot of videos. And I'll tell you, I was having so much fun out there all over those countries. I did videos wherever I could go. And, one of my favorite things when it comes to having a microphone to me, Bob, is like a kid having a lollipop. You can never have it enough. So, Candy, go ahead.
I've been to Chelsea, and
how'd you like the place?
That's the one premiership. Oh, that was fine. It's the one premiership game that I've been to, and I've been to in Paris. I've been to a Paris Saint-Germain home game, but I have been to Chelsea. So yes, that was fun. They lost to who did they lose to? I'm trying to think. But Bournemouth. They lost the game. Strange.
Yeah, was that when the stadium was 40,000 recently dropped down, or was it?
I know about five, somewhere between 5 and 7 years ago.
Okay, well right. You got the new stadium.
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, I know we've covered a lot of ground. So Bob, when you look at your career overall, how would you define everything that you've done, and how pleased are you with what you've done? I know you've covered a lot of major sports. Nobody can cover them all, but my mentors have always taught me, and maybe you could tell this other. Sorry.
When you start out, you don't have any idea. I didn't have any grand ambition. I didn't have any goal. I just wanted to have a job and work.
Right.
And I became a fan of newspapers in Trenton, New Jersey, and I remember being a fan of a local writer named Joe Logue, Logue, who was a big scholastic writer in Trenton. And one day when I was playing for Lawrenceville School, he covered the game, and they didn't know cover much preppies. They covered the high schools, and the thrill I had to know that my name was going to be in the paper in a story that Joe Logue had written the next day. I did a pretty good game, so I got my name in the paper in the Trentonian with Joe Logue. But I just thought locally, I didn't know. And I lucked in. I mean, come on, how lucky was I at age 23 to be handed the Boston Celtics? Pete, due to circumstances, it shouldn't have happened. I should have had somebody groomed, but they didn't. And they threw it to me, and that launched my career. Okay. And the other thing that the big bonus that I never dreamed of, that is a part of my portfolio and memories, is Olympics. And I didn't cover any Olympics until '92. And when the dream team was formed, I definitely said, I want in on this. And I didn't extrapolate it beyond the '92 Olympics in Barcelona, except when I got over there, and I started going around to other events, and I started experiencing the whole ambiance and culture of how the Olympics work from a journalistic standpoint and a fan standpoint. I loved it, and I wound up being a part of it now for the rest of my career. So I went to 6 summer and 5 winter Olympics, and, that wasn't part of the deal in my head. So that was a bonus, a complete bonus. Everything else that happened, you can't project. I mean, first of all, how many championships? You're going to tell me I was going to wind up covering the championships and all 14? Who could have proceeded? Who could have foreseen the rise of the Patriots? Who were buffoons, frankly, before they got rolling in the 2000s. So it's a fulfilling, rewarding, surprisingly, surprising career, but I was in the right place. I can tell you, you couldn't have been treated better or had a better launching pad and backing than I got at the Boston Globe in those years. Period. I could not have done better, and so I'm very eternally grateful for that.
I'm glad because Bob, you're as class as they get. A couple of people that stand up in my mind are Charlie Vincent and Joe Falls, and the two things that they taught me were not, just make sure you're as versatile as you can get and don't settle in on one sport. So what I've done is I've taken their advice and tried to go out there and do what these people said. I cover as many sports as I can. I really do. I think you need to get a perspective of how every different type of athlete thinks and how they prepare and how they relate. And Joe Falls to me is a jewel. He really, really is. And Charlie Vincent to me was another guy that what can I say? I mean, and I've traveled on the road with some of these teams. And then sometimes I think you even get to know the PR people a little bit better, more so when you're on the road than you're at home, because then they get to know you. And we are now with all this politicking with these younger people, it gets to a point where you were smart, Rob. You knew when to get out when you had to get out. And I think that we're both fortunate. If it weren't for this business, I wouldn't be meeting you. And we've had a lot of great times in multiple places. And what I've even learned tonight is you've been to some games that I was at, I just didn't see you there. And so I'm thinking about the Super Bowl, the final game at Tiger, saying this is just surreal stuff. And Bob, you just added another thrill in my life. I had Steve Holman Sr. on. All you guys that have been in a while, I treasure every one of you experienced people, because if it weren't for people like you, then I wouldn't be able to have mentors like you and friends that I could talk to, take pictures with, because we all realize we're here for a certain period of time, and I'm just so happy you did this. Candy, I know you've been patiently producing and waiting. Is there any question or two that you want to ask Bob, Ryan? Because you obviously are taking pictures, doing videos that you'd want to ask them.
You covered a lot of things so far. I mean, Bob, you had a very historic career. I guess, what is the one sport you enjoyed the most?
I grew up, my foundation sports were baseball and college basketball. But I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that the sport that launched me and where I had the most, if you will, success is basketball, the NBA. And I'm proud of my, what I was able to do, to demonstrate my basketball writing and capture the moments that should have been captured, at the time, and in a way that, frankly, people aren't trying anymore. They're not being encouraged to. Editors don't even encourage them, guys, to write that way, and or women, to anybody to. And I was able to show off, in other words, in a sense, and so that's it. That's basketball. Baseball still. I love baseball. I've always loved baseball. It got me started. But my greatest opportunity to shine, were basketball. So I'll stick with basketball.
And another follow-up question. Is there one athlete that maybe the media portrays one way, but you know of them really in a different way, like that the media has it all wrong? Is there one?
Scott, we talked about Bird earlier, and Bird and the great response he got about thinking 3 steps ahead, than everybody else and all that. I'm not sure that's universally appreciated the way it should have been. Okay. Larry, remember that he allowed this, or no, I shouldn't say he allowed. He came into our consciousness in the NBA as the quote hick from French Lick. And the guy I got to know was very intelligent and very aware. And I used to kid him. I said, what he did was education per se wasn't valued where he grew up. It wasn't. And in that county. And I said, you successfully evaded the American educational system for 20 years. But he was a reader. He read novels. He knew what was going on. Trust me. So I think people may still have a distorted view of how shrewd, and I think he should have shown that the world that way. He was a successful coach. And how about this about Larry? Larry said when he started with coaching the Pacers, I'm going to coach 3 years and that's it. Nobody lives up to those promises, right? Larry did. He coached 3 years and he got to the finals and they lost to the Lakers. And he was more frustrated the year before. He thought they should have beaten the Bulls and gotten to the finals. And he blamed himself for not aligning the guys with the crucial jump ball with 20 seconds to go in the game. I'm serious. And he blamed himself, and he quit. And he's never coached again. He did it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to coach for 3 years. I'm going to quit. And he never came back. He's a man of conviction. So I think if anybody, he may not be the one closest answer I have for you of my personal acquaintance would be Larry.
And one last question, Scott. Is there any one sports persona that you wish you had met and wrote about that you didn't get a chance to?
That's interesting. Really. I thought about players I wish I had seen.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regard, the guy who intrigued me with the way he was always described as a player, and to set him apart from the rabble, from everybody else, was Joe DiMaggio. I wish I had seen him play a season to see what captivated the writers in America, the way he did, that gave him a different persona than any other player of his time. And I would love to have seen it. I got this, so in terms of the personality, I don't have an answer for you. I'm trying to think, but you might say Ted Williams, in terms of that I interviewed him, but I never knew him. I interviewed him as a manager for the Washington Senators, and that's where I interviewed him. And he was gracious. He was fine, but it would have been fun. I think based on everything I read about him, it might have been fun to actually be able to, have a few beers with Ted. That would be fun.
No show would be complete if we didn't talk about the WNBA. I had a chance to meet Gino Auriemma. I really enjoyed him and the legacy that he's done. Pat Summitt's done a lot for the game as well. Have you ever followed women's sports?
I'm going to tell you this. I'm glad. This is so great you brought him up because it speaks to the times as well. In 1995, Tennessee came to play UConn at Stores. Big deal. This is the first UConn team en route. Okay, his first really, 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 really good team with Rebecca Lobo and Kara Walters, that group. Okay, and they beat them. And I write a story. I covered the game. I went down to Stores. I covered the game, and I wrote a story. And I remember thinking something along the lines of, "Boy, there was nowhere else I'd rather be on earth than in that building today," kind of thing. Anyway, I got a handwritten thank you note from Gino Auriemma.
Really?
About my coverage of the game.
Wow.
And I've only gotten notes of that nature maybe three or four times ever. And but he wrote me a thank you note for coverage and what I said. And I never really spent any more time with him, over the years. But I always remembered that, and I always rooted for him and I rooted for his teams. So I wish, I'd love to get to know.
Yeah, I covered my first women's Final Four with Candy. It was unbelievable. And whether you know it or not, I was at the 1982 Final Four when Michael Jordan won it all, but I was a fan there. Gary Bender was calling it at the Superdome as well, but I bought tickets for that one. And Go ahead.
82 at the Olympic in Barcelona, 92 in Barcelona. I covered men's and women's, the whole, I covered every women's
Wow.
game. And I have written this in my book, my autobiography, Scribe, among
Yeah.
that one of the pivotal games, moments I ever had in sports was that game. That was when the Russians beat the U.S. in the semis. When the
Yeah.
Russians beat the vaunted U.S., who were kicking everybody's ass. And they did it. And that was the year of the breakup of the Soviet Union had broken up. And these women were from several of the different Soviet USSR republics.
Yeah.
And they're all with uncertain futures as to where they're going to live, what they're going to do, what kind of climate they're going to go back to. And that they were bonded by being this basketball team. And they were no longer Russians. They were all these individual entities from these Soviet republics. And that if they're, and you know that phrase about people say, really, we only did this for the team of people in this room, right? You know, screw the world. That team truly was the one team that could honestly say, we only did it for the people in this room, because none of them, they knew what was going to happen to them when that thing was over. And they beat the US with a great game plan by the coach, who was Alexander Gromelsky, the coach, younger brother. And he was the coach of the team. And I said that was my most memorable Olympic basketball game that I ever covered, men or women, was that game. So, and I followed the women every year that I went to the Olympics or World Championships. I kept track of the women. I like women's game.
You know, it takes them. I learned a lot about it. Gino, I don't know, it was really nice to me. I got a couple pictures of him, which was really nice too. He's a class act, but we all know full well that he was part of it. But let's not lose the fact that Pat Summitt, to me, is one of the people that we should never forget when it comes to what women's sports is all about.
No, she was the gold standard, and it's absolutely.
And lastly, the WNBA. What do you think of it right now? Obviously, Caitlin Clark is the face of the league, and they've had a pretty good history, and I know they're looking to expand. But
I don't like the messiness about disputing about her role and how important in the way she's incredibly important. They have to agree to that, but it has to be more than that. We know that it has to be more than that, and for them to succeed. But they're on an upward roll. I think she gave them a boost, but I think they're capable of taking it now, taking the ball and carrying it, just without her. And of course, the team is playing very well without her. I know that, but we want her back and as soon as possible. And but I didn't like the undertone, frankly, the racial undertone about the issue about her, and that was uncomfortable to me, and I think to many others. And you don't want to deny how important she was, and she was unfairly, I don't know, not attacked, but it just was a mess, and I don't like it that. But I think in general terms, they're in good shape. Of course, we have an issue now in Boston with Steve Pagliuca saying he wants to buy the team, move it to Boston, and they're saying, well, wait a minute, we can't just do that. We have to have the league approve it, and we don't just go transfer teams willy-nilly and all that. But I hope they recognize that Steve Pagliuca would be a very, very good person to have in their league.
Yeah, I hope so too. I know we've covered basketball, a lot of sports on all levels, but I have to go back to what Bill Simmons said, the best basketball writer ever. And when we talk about the magnitude of what we have talked about with basketball, I don't mind what we talk about the NFL. You and I can talk hours and hours. I don't want to do that to you because you've been so gracious with your time tonight. But my name is Scott Morgenroth from the Motor City Man Show. I'm here with Bob Ryan. Candy Ebling is also in with us on this show as well. Hope you're having a good time. I know this is a show that Bob, to me, is treasure. TREASURE with an exclamation point as high as you can have it. And he's a friend of mine and a mentor, colleague as well. And I just want to thank him so much for being on this show tonight. And Bob, like I said, I can't thank you enough for being on here and taking all this time so that you can educate not only myself, but again, you and I talk about Larry Bird. He is a great person. He's willing to offer his knowledge and the way he played the game, teaching me, And I remember it like as if it were yesterday. I think that's it because he was a thinking man player, wasn't
No,
he?
no question.
But you can take lessons from players as from any sport, coaches, and apply them to yourselves and become a better person because of it. But I am so glad you got out and retired at the right time. I really am because I think that you have to know when to stay and when to go. And you left on your terms, and in life a lot of people can't say that they have. So thank you very much for joining us on the Motor City Mad Mouse Show. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I'll be contacting you once in a while to pick your brain for words of wisdom and hopefully seeing you in the not so distant future. Bob, thanks again, my friend.
Sounds good. Good. I had a good time, Scott. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right, Candy, anything you want to add real quick?
Nope. Thank you, Bob. It's been
Welcome.
very enlightening.
Thank you.
Bob.
Appreciate that.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys.